Hi, I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, host of Highly Sensitive Money. I'm a money coach, certified financial planner, and a highly sensitive person who brings money and social justice together. If you're someone who feels deeply, can endlessly think through how one decision affects everything else, or has ever struggled with all the things that traditional financial thinking leaves out, you're in the right place. In this show, I chat with highly sensitive people on how they handle their money, and with money experts on how they cultivate social justice in their work. Questions? Please go to allthecolors.net and schedule a free 30-minute call. And I'm happy to share resources on investment management, money coaching, workshops, or anything else money and social justice related. Join us in this episode as we explore money and sensitivity while honoring that all of our well-being is interconnected. I'm thrilled to bring listeners Dr. Kaeri Schaefer, a family physician and intuitive healer whose work bridges medicine, bodywork, and somatics. Kaeri calls her approach collaborative understory medicine, a way of listening beneath the surface of symptoms to understand what our bodies are communicating. Together, we explore what it means to move at the pace of relationship in medicine, how space and consent shape healing, and the profound wisdom found in our chatty bodies, especially for those of us who identify as highly sensitive. Kaeri also shares her journey from traditional clinical settings to creating more spacious relational care, and how privilege, money, and access intertwine in that process. This is a sweet, HSP meandering conversation about slowing down, honoring our inner knowing, and allowing curiosity rather than fear to guide us toward true healing. Welcome, Kaeri. I'm excited to have you here. We met through Kinship, Anya Hankin's kind of container for solopreneurs, business owners, I think a lot of sensitive people. So I'm really excited to have you here. And to start off, can you introduce yourself and your work?
Sure. My name is Kaeri Schaefer. I am a healing provider. I am trained as an MD. I went to University of Wisconsin for medical school and got board certified in family medicine at Providence, Milwaukee, in a suburb of Portland, Oregon. And I don't think that well explains what I do, but it is an important background to how I came to what I do. At this point, I see myself as a functional medicine provider, a body worker, a somatic practitioner, a medical guide, and a body interpreter. I've also been trying to figure out how do I combine all those things to actually have a describing word for what it is that I do and offer. So my new, this weekend, I came up with this phrase, which is collaborative understory medicine. And essentially what that means is that the way I work with my one-on-one work is I'm working closely with the people who I am supporting, really trying to make sure that they are getting the care that they're looking for and the support that they're wanting. And I'm bringing in both my functional medicine training, which is kind of the why of what's going on in our body, and my body work training to go to explore why they're in our body. And so the understory component of my current name, of how I name what I do, is really kind of the trying to understand the why, the when, the what, what's all coming together to create the way our bodies are communicating. And the Western medicine world uses symptoms as the phrase. I prefer to use body communication as the phrase. And I work with a lot of highly sensitive humans, or I often refer to us, including me, as people with loud bodies. And so, yeah, that's what I do one-on-one. And then I've been expanding my work to bring more of that body communication piece to people by offering online embodied anatomy classes. So we're together in a year-long cohort, learning what's happening in our body, what do those parts look like, how are they working to take care of us. We're really learning from the lens of our bodies love us and want us to thrive. And so how are they communicating through things we might think of as symptoms as a way to say, hey, this is how I need to be taken care of. This is how you can tend to me. And it's a learning experience to understand what that communication is, because our bodies don't use words. And so we need to work together with our bodies to figure out what that communication means.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. There's a phrase that really stuck out to me. Highly sensitive people have loud bodies. And in some ways, I disagree. Earlier, a few months ago, I was talking with someone about how when I was in the corporate world, it felt like I couldn't deal with all of the dissonance because the slightest thing, it's kind of like the Princess and the Pea story. Like there was a little bit of dissonance and that was enough to throw me off.
Yeah.
And then I think of people who need a 2x4 in order to realize that there's dissonance, right? Like just with the tiniest discrepancy, I'm like, this isn't working. And this woman that I was talking to, she's like, I need a lot more pressure. I need a ton of feedback. I need a lot of loudness for me to even notice it. So yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I appreciate the conversation and like your take on it. I think my interpretation of loud is the Princess and the Pea space of like our bodies. And here's the thing, right? We're all different, right? Like I'm speaking to many of the people that I work with who are both highly sensitive and have loud bodies, or meaning bodies that they sense quickly and notice things in that way. And so loud may be as frequent, but maybe not as loud. And which, we're on a podcast, so you can't see that my hands went up in the air. But like, yeah, I'm using loud in the context of frequently communicating or like very sensitive, right? Rather than needing the loudness to be able to recognize that there's a communication, like needing the body to have a significant response for there to be even an awareness that there's a communication.
Yeah. So maybe just like chatty bodies, right?
Yeah,
Chatty,
maybe
nervous
loud isn't
system.
the right word. Yeah. I appreciate that, because maybe loud isn't the right word. Maybe it is communicative or chatty, right? There's a lot to say. I got a lot to tell you.
One other thing that you mentioned in your introduction of your work is collaborative understory medicine. Can you share more about what you mean by understory?
Yeah. So the understory is in like a forest, is the kind of lower plants, the plants that are under kind of the trees that are seen. And it actually came because I just moved into a new healing space, and I see the space within which I work to be a collaborator in our work. And I've asked people for names. And one of the people, and I asked the people that I do healing support for, and one of the people suggested understory as the name of the space. We're right next to a really large beech nut tree. And her thoughts, which really kind of resonated for me, were about how we work on, so that really it's about kind of looking at the reasons, and not necessarily always reasons, sometimes the story behind the body experience. Sometimes there is a functional story in our body, meaning, my liver, for example, has been working really hard, because livers work really hard to clear stuff, either stuff we take in, generally, or stuff we are processing. And that can be emotional as well as things we drink, eat, etc. So sometimes what you might be noticing is your liver is communicating that they're not working as smoothly because they're kind of bogged down. And that could be a sensation in your liver, which is on the right, kind of right upper abdomen, right under your right rib. So you might notice, oh, that's just feeling a little gooky or tight or things like that. And that's with the more chatty bodies, probably, that you're going to notice those things. Versus sometimes when we haven't noticed that or haven't heard it or didn't know what that meant, then the liver might get louder because now it's really painful. Or now you have yellow skin because your body's actually processing bile, which is one of our tools, is how liver processes things is by making bile, which digests fat in our intestines. So, like, that's a bigger example of, oh, this is a significant shift that you might see. And so that would be kind of something that someone might call a symptom. I would still call it a body communication because it's still a communication, and it's a bigger communication perhaps than the subtle chatty body. Yeah. What is my point? My point is that is part of the story. And sometimes it's something that the Western medicine world can pinpoint and be like, oh, now I did labs. Now I did an ultrasound of a person's liver. And now I have info to say, oh, yeah, your liver is having a harder time. That still doesn't tell us why your liver is having a harder time. It just essentially confirms what maybe the person already felt, which is my liver's having a harder time. And so my work is often, not always, but often connecting with people before the Western medicine approach of labs and imaging would show something, but not always. Sometimes that's an added tool we have access to if we want to, because I do happen to have that training and that a degree that allows me to order those things. And so sometimes we will. And we're also starting with a process of body connection. And so having both, I do hands-on work for my in-person people, and the person is then sensing and connecting into and practicing connecting into that space. That's kind of the language of somatics, is the process of body connection. And I'm utilizing it as a way to better understand how our bodies are trying to do what they are meant to do and how they're trying to take care of us. And so I think the understory is the space of trying to understand the why under those communications and sometimes it is something that a Western medical world might approach. And sometimes you do all the labs and you have body communication, but there's not something that's shown.
So the understory is it's looking for the root cause. What is it that's being communicated? Okay.
Yeah, the why behind. And sometimes that why is something we can have this is the way our body functions story. And sometimes it's a life experience story that our body is holding. And that's sometimes where that somatic part comes in of, oh, every time I'm exposed to this boundary coming up that I come up against that stresses me out, I feel this emotion in this part of my body. Or I feel pain or discomfort or nausea or what have you, because this thing's coming up for me in my body experience or in my life, and then my body is communicating that. So, for example, I have something called Bell's palsy, if we're going to put a label on it, which means the left half of my face does not move as well because I had the seventh cranial nerve, the nerve that moves my facial muscles, get irritated or inflamed, likely due to exposure to Lyme disease. So all of that is background. And and that happened to me while I was in residency. So while I was in some of the most intense medical training time. Medical training is exhausting, traumatizing, challenging, stressful, and there are some amazing things that we get to experience because of that, because of medical training. And it allows me to do what I do. And what I have learned in the last few years as I've been doing both holding space with somatically, but doing my own somatic healing process or body connection healing process, is that when I'm feeling stressed by the medical system, so the ways the system is not truly honoring healing or humanity, my left side of my face starts to tighten and tense up. And it causes jaw pain, sometimes tooth pain, and even sometimes jaw clicking, but less so now because now I recognize it and I'm able to pause and go, oh, the left side of my face is tightening even more. Let me connect with my body, let me pause. And often that will bring my brain to the space to help me understand what triggered that. Does that help explain it a little bit?
Thank you for that example, Kaeri. That is really helpful. I completely love the work that you're doing. I'm currently reading The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate, who's a medical doctor out of Vancouver, and he's got so many criticisms of Western medicine. That's like the big part of the book. And in what you're saying, I'm hearing he's like asking like, when do doctors ask these questions? And I'm hearing you say like, I ask those questions. I ask the questions around how are you feeling? What are the circumstances in which this pain comes up? And thank you for sharing your own personal example. And I'm really curious, like, how did you get here? This show is about money, and becoming a doctor is not a cheap thing. And I imagine that going from the more Western approach of medicine with the income stability that comes with that is very different from what you're choosing to do now as an entrepreneur, working in a completely different side of medicine.
Yeah, well, it's a fair point, and I think, and my brain, I pause because my brain's like, there's so many directions that I need to go to answer that question. Well, I think one of the things to name, and I will name that this is the thing that I feel most uncomfortable in my body about when it comes to money, is that I have to recognize that I grew up in financial privilege. And so was very lucky, and I did not leave medical school with debt, thanks to my parents prioritizing and having the capacity and financial spaciousness to hold that for me. It is because of that it has been easier for me to follow the path that I needed to follow. If I didn't have that, I would no longer be practicing medicine, because I don't see that I can be a provider in the system in the way I was trained, in the way that most people are being asked to be in the system.
I'll pause you there because that's such a big point. I don't know about how this is in medicine, but I know in finances, a lot of people of color come into the finance world and they don't stay because of the way that it's set up and the way that we're expected to show up, how we're supposed to solicit business. So I wonder what the attrition rate is for highly sensitive people, deeply empathic people in the medical field.
Yeah, me too. And that's kind of a feeling like my soul's purpose. Like I shared earlier what I'm already doing, but kind of what I'm dreaming of doing is trying to help more highly sensitive humans who went into medicine wanting to truly like be of service and feeling like somewhere inside that's their calling. Because for me, it was like, I was in middle school, and in middle school I was like, I'm going to be a doctor because that's the kind of healer I had seen. So clearly that's what I was going to do. And it's always felt like the path that I was meant to follow. And as I've been able to move from the Western medicine space into this more integrative, holistic, more aligned space, that has helped me really see, yeah, this is my path. This is where I'm meant to be. And I can't do it in the space of 25 patients in a day, in rooms with white walls and no windows. So when I finished residency, I was hired by, I already knew I didn't want to work for a large group, and because I did have some spaciousness financially, I chose to work for a smaller private practice in Portland, Oregon. And it had some of the providers who had been there or were about to retire were people who truly gave of themselves and were I knew that they were the kind of providers that I wanted to model after. And so it felt like, oh, this is the place to be. The income was definitely not as much as if I had been working as an employed physician at Providence or OHSU or Legacy, which are our large spaces. And it was a way to kind of just start practicing with other people around that I could ask questions of and things like that. And pretty quickly I realized that even with 20 minutes being our shortest appointment time, that was sometimes, or maybe often, too short. And that I couldn't really hold space for the people's needs. One thing I've learned over the last couple of years, which is now a while since then, is that I also just have a slower pace. That's my authentic, aligned, what feels good pace. And I also think that unearthing of the understory, right, understanding the why of the person's experience takes time. And it requires a feeling of trust and safety. And I can't really offer that, one, if I don't feel safe as a provider. And I can't, if I'm feeling anxious and jittery, it's harder for me to hold you in a space of safety, to be able to then, for you to find a way to touch into safety, especially if your body doesn't feel safe. And so, yeah, I basically observed people, like when I held more space for them, which I just kind of did because I would rather do that than be on time. That's when we would get to the reason, right? That's when we would get to that understory, and that then we could really move towards healing, is when we understood why we were where we were in the first place. And so I decided I was going to start my own practice so I could have longer appointment times. And also the clinic that I was working at ended up being purchased by a larger group that was clearly not aligned. I did interview with them to see, and the providers came to the interview in white coats. And it was two old white men in white coats. And I was like, oh, this is not both.
You're like, I can see the writing on the wall. Yes.
Yeah, from the get-go. So, and I was pregnant at the time. So I had my first baby right after the clinic was sold. And so I basically used that as an opportunity to spend time with my kiddo and start my own private practice that was still family medicine with a more holistic bend, and had longer appointment times. Like my shortest appointment was 30 minutes.
Okay. And I hear just this desire to move at the pace of relationship.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the relationship is key. Like, I think relationship is essential to how I want to be practicing my medicine, and the people that I want to interact with is like, I want to have it be a relational experience, not a hierarchical experience. And unfortunately, the medical system is very built on hierarchy, and encourages that relationship within medical language. How the providers, like that we use the word non-compliant patient, which I hate and I will never use other than in this example, because that's, again, creating this story of like, well, I know you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And that's bullshit. Sorry if you don't want that language in here. Like, well, it is our job to support, to guide, and to help a person find a path that is truly healing. And if the thing that some doctor said, please, or maybe not please, do this, and it doesn't work for you, then it's not the right plan. Like, if it doesn't work for you, it's not the right plan. So then let's figure out a plan that will work. And that's the collaborative piece, and I think, and relational piece to the way I work and what's really important to me in really want more providers to be able to do that, and more so people can actually move towards healing and not just not be stuck in the fear of what label are we going to put on my body this time, and what pharmaceutical are you going to tell me I need to use, and are you going to tell me I need to do anything? Because at the end of the day, we as providers really can't even say, I don't think it's honoring to say you need to do anything, because at the end of the day, it's the person whose body experience it is who gets to choose. And yeah, maybe if you choose to not take that antibiotic, there could be significant circumstances, but you're still a choice. And to me, that's a really essential component of how I offer my healing, and wish that more providers would do that. And then I'm trying to figure out, how do I help more providers shift that thinking?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love what you're saying about like you had the financial flexibility to take this jump, to take this change, right? Which I imagine you're not the only one. There must be a lot of medical providers that are like, I wish that I could focus on healing instead of having to rush. And then I know that there's a lot of doctors that have like the God complex, and they're like, yes, I am 100% right. Your body has no idea what it's talking about, like gaslighting 101. Just like in every profession, there's both extremes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the curiosity as I'm moving into trying to figure out how to offer support to other providers who may not have come from that same financial spaciousness, is, okay, how do I help you do it? And it's going to be your way anyway, because no one's magic is the same, or medicine, or whatever word we want to use for our gifts, is the same as mine, right? Theirs is theirs. And I want them to find theirs to be able to really live in it. And how do I help people do that when it is more of a financial, like, trust fall, perhaps, or leap? Or maybe it's smaller moves where it's like, oh, I didn't choose to start my own practice, but I'm shifting at least my language and how I can connect with people, or changing the room so I feel more comfortable and safe in that room rather than in a white-walled space that feels really cold. Space matters a lot to me. I was a theater and dance major, and I did set design and costume design. And so I think there's part of that story, but also the first place I practiced, my 2 exam rooms were inside, no windows, white walls, and very teeny. And like, that didn't feel good for me. And like, especially for family medicine, how do you do kid care in that? Like, it's doesn't create a space of safety and comfort and play and fun. And so when I started my own practice, what was really important to me was that I was going to be in a space with windows, non-fluorescent lighting, and color on the walls. And I got that, or I made that in reality. Like, I chose that and made it happen. And it made a significant difference for me and for the people who joined me. Like, I more than once had someone break into tears when they came in, seeing that it was different and not the same as the typical system spaces.
I love that. I love that. And I want to I have one last question for this transition that you went through. So for myself as an investment advisor, sometimes people, the more mainstream idea of finance is that you always are only looking for profit, right? Only looking for profit. So if our clients are like, I don't want to invest in fossil fuels, I don't want to invest in private prisons, we have to tell them, but those things are profitable. Right. At the firm where I work at now, we've documented that people are deciding to prioritize these values because as fiduciaries, we have to do what's in their best interest. At the end of the day, though, it's the client's money, right? Just like you're saying, it's my patient's body. Because I imagine that there's someone might be listening and saying, but as a doctor, I have to do this incredibly invasive thing. I have to do all of these tests. I have to, because of lawsuits, because of this is how it's supposed to be done. I don't know that you have an answer for that, but I know that at my firm, we figured out this is what we can do in order to both be fiduciaries and acknowledge that our client is not profit first, profit only. And I wonder what that looks like in medical care.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because what just popped into my mind is I was just having a conversation with a couple of dear friends who are in their 70s. And we were talking, and one of them has a chronic illness that is significantly impacting them. And because of that, they're part of a support group. And so what came up was this conversation that was had where one of the other people experiencing significant medical body impact, had tried to talk to their provider about kind of helping them like be more comfortable. I forget the exact phrasing, but what came up, we were talking about death with dignity. So I live in Oregon where we have that as a law that is allowed. Yeah. And in this conversation about death with dignity, what was shared was that they had heard a doctor say, "It's my job to keep you alive. It is not my job. Like, that's my job." And I think we're taught that, but I don't think it serves us, because at the end of the day, the only thing that we know is going to happen is we are going to die. We don't know when, we don't know how, and for me, I hope it's a long time from now, and it's going to happen because that's part of our process. But unfortunately, our medical system and society's way of navigating death is currently, I think it's starting to shift, but has been and is currently that death is failure. But it can't be if it's inevitable. And what if we're truly looking at how can we help people have the best life they can, right? The healthiest, and everyone's version of healthy is going to be different, right? And so remembering that, like, the version of healthy that our advertising agencies offer is not most people's healthy, probably not anyone's really, but I can't speak for everyone because I'm not everyone. But the Western medical system creates a similar story of like, well, there's this one form of wellness or health, and there's not, and there can't be, because we're all different and we all have different needs and wants and bodies. And so what was my point? My point is that I think for me, the way I navigate kind of the legality, kind of like litigious nature of my profession and the world, is that I do have forms people fill out that they know that like can't have any obvious outcome. Like I can't ensure an outcome. Yeah. But also it goes back to the relational nature. Like whenever I take a class from our malpractice, because if you take a class from malpractice about risk, then you get to pay less in malpractice. So it is of benefit to do that. And it's theoretically useful. I usually leave it stressed out and not sure I want to still be in medicine because that stresses me out. But what is consistently shared is if you have a relational experience, then you are less likely to be sued. The family medicine providers, least likely to be sued because we develop a relationship and connection with the people. And the people then know, like, we're all doing our best. Also, the part of the challenge is when we're in these, like, the more kind of capitalist approach to the medical field with those short appointment times, you're more likely to miss something than if you're taking time and you're moving with integrity. Like, hey, team, let's take that moment to make sure we're connected, make sure I hear you. I need to take a pause and realize, am I pausing? Am I moving with integrity? Am I offering the choices and making sure you are clear about the choices? And this is the challenge. There's the many challenges, as we've already touched on, of the systemness of of medicine and the capitalistness of medicine. And the hierarchy, right? It goes back to that hierarchy space. If you're in that I know best doctor role and you tell someone you're going to do this, if you're wrong, they're not feeling as good about it and not feeling like they had choice in it. And they're more likely to be like, I'm not cool with how you navigated that. Then, hey, here you get choice. This is what I would strongly suggest based on my experience and knowledge. And yes, I am sharing risks. And we have it as a conversation rather than I'm sharing the risks so I can check them off the box so that you can't actually sue me because I did tell you it was a risk, but we didn't really have the conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Thank
Did
you
that
for
answer
that.
your
I
question?
did. Yeah, thank you for that additional context. We touched on it earlier, but one of the questions that I often ask interviewees is what was the financial background of your childhood and how does it affect the work that you do today? And I've heard some of the flexibility that you've received, but I wonder if there's anything else that you might want to share.
I mean, what it does mean is that I'm really, it's important to me to offer care in a way that makes it accessible. I think what is challenging about medicine, I mean, there's many things. One of the challenging things is that not everyone can get care. And as a holistic practitioner, which is what I feel is actually really important, like that integrative, more holistic approach and more spacious approach, I think is essential to healing. But if the only people that are offering that at high price points, then it's not an accessible tool. And and a lot of people don't take like our Oregon Health Plan, for example, so our Medicaid insurance, because they don't pay as well, or because the paperwork is really challenging, or things like that. And so what's been important to me is to make sure that people can get care. And so, and simultaneously, the insurance companies often make that harder. And so I ended up leaving insurance and starting a nonprofit, which I'm not actually any longer working with, but I did that in 2019. Is I said, like, the insurance things were changing, and they were making this rule that you had to be a medical home, which requires a lot of paperwork. The theory behind it is that it offers more support for the people who are getting care from that location. And as a solo practitioner, without a large amount of people I was paying, and I wasn't about to do that paperwork, I couldn't be a medical home. So then I couldn't be on many insurance plans. And I had people saying, well, you can't be on my insurance, but I still really want to see you. And the challenge is when you're in with insurance, then you don't have the same flexibility to change your pricing depending on people's capacity and needs because of the contracts you make with insurance. And I'm like, this is not good care. This is not good medicine. And I don't want to also have to keep labeling people because I have to put a code for every person if I'm going to send that bill to insurance. And language is restrictive and limited, and people are more than the codes we give them or the labels we give them. And especially as I look at things from a body communication lens, rather than always a looking for the diagnosis to label lens, it didn't work. So I said, I'm going to leave insurance, but I want to make sure that my care is accessible. So I started a nonprofit that was pay what you can. And that didn't work well in reality from a financial standpoint. I had the flexibility to be in it for a while. And I think my socialist heart was like, people will do this. If you can pay, you will. So that the people who can pay less will pay less. And in reality, it is not really what happened. And so the nonprofit has actually switched and is now taking insurance and still saying, we will never turn anyone away. So people can come there without insurance. You can pay what you can. And we will also use your insurance if you want us to. That happened as I left, both because I could not actually do that and offer the care I wanted in the way I wanted to, and because I just realized like where I needed to be was in a space where I could really do things exactly the way I wanted to do them, to really offer my expansive. Now my appointment times are an hour and a half. So like long appointments where we're really going in deep into that understory. So.
Okay. And I'm sorry to hear that the first attempt at pay what you can didn't work. It can take so many different iterations to figure out how to make things accessible.
Yeah, and I'm so proud that it's still existing, and I'm so excited that it's called Healthy Living Community, and it's in Portland, and they have some great providers, and they have an awesome executive director, and it can't hold me. It's still more system than will work for me, and that's okay. I still think that it's better than most places within the system. And yeah, and they're still trying to figure it out. They're trying to figure out sustainability and how does that work. And it was an interesting part of my life to try to create a community. And there was a community aspect to it too. And like that became hard when all of a sudden you needed to be virtual or not near people. In this 9 months after I started the nonprofits. So.
Wow. Another topic that I want us to touch on is the somatics of finance. I know that was one of the main things that intrigued you about being on this podcast and speaking to. I know in my experience as a money coach, Sometimes when when clients come in and they feel like they're really outside their bodies. They feel like
Mm-hmm.
they're really like they haven't been able to settle and they want to tell me a million different stories. I often will interrupt and be like, "Actually, let's land. Let's focus on your feet. Let's do a quick little body scan." I usually take like 3 or 4 minutes. It's a very quick body scan, really. And the shift that I see in clients of like the clarity that they get from just that quick pause is always really amazing. I'd love to hear your experience of somatics and money and how that comes up in your work with clients or how it has come up in your work with clients.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think as I touched on earlier, there's like I hold certain things in my face. Yeah. What I've learned is that people hold different kind of stresses in different parts of their bodies. And so if it may be that, oh, I'm feeling, and this is something I observed and it supported someone through, where, oh, I'm feeling significant tension and tightness in this one spot in my body. Okay. Then when we kind of pause to explore that, that is when the communication comes of, and, oh, I'm feeling really sensitive, like feeling really stressed about my finances. Okay. That becomes, that we kind of realize over time and practice, oh, that's that communication spot of where, you could know it and maybe name it, but not necessarily recognize that your body's communicating that your body's saying, oh, this is feeling tough. Like, or I'm feeling like I'm concerned that I won't have what I need, right? Like that component of finances of, I don't know that I'll have what I need. My what I tend to feel around finances more often is a shame space because I did experience financial privilege and continue to experience financial privilege that has allowed me to offer care for low prices in the way that I want to, and I'm grateful that I have that privilege to be able to offer that without having to figure out how to also pay for food for my family. And so for me, it's kind of a shame space. Whereas like, oh, I start to feel like I'm not taking care of my money well, the money that I was received well. And then I feel it in my chest. Like I get this like, sometimes it's obvious, or sometimes I'm feeling this chest. And then it's again sitting and listening to that space. And so I think the thing that I was thinking about when we were kind of chatting and said, oh, maybe we talk about this on the podcast, was that sometimes we might not realize that specifically the financial piece is feeling tough for us right now. Or the vice versa of, oh, I know that I'm feeling stressed about money because that's something that is something people talk about sometimes, maybe not to the degree, but like there's an acceptance of you might be stressed about money, right? That could be a thing that we accept in our bodied experience or accept in our world, but that's informing our bodied experience, and that our body might be saying, yeah, and that's contributing to the pain that I'm feeling in my shoulder, that I am feeling in my low back. That's contributing to my feelings of safety, and that is often in our kind of pelvic floor or root chakra, if you follow the chakra systems. I have to pee all the time. I have incontinence, meaning we pee when we don't mean to. I'm constipated, so I'm having trouble pooping consistently, or it's hard, or or pebbly or any of those things. There's many ways to be constipated. Like all of those are ways our body could be communicating around like that financial safety piece, that stress piece. And each body's different, right? So it could be that you get an eye twitch or ringing in your ears, or there's many different ways, and that's where that kind of practice of like pausing, sensing what's coming up for you right now as you're talking about or feeling into the financial piece. And I think that's kind of what we had touched on or chatted about kind of in our kinship space of like, oh, this is something that we both share, is that awareness of that somatic piece. And I haven't done a coaching session with you, but I get the impression that that kind of comes into your sessions sometimes.
Definitely. Up to a certain level. My training in somatics was through Gabor Mate's Compassionate Inquiry program. And the container that I have with clients is very open on the money side of it. But there's some things where I kind of respect the limits of what people are comfortable sharing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I often do is I'll ask them, like, for example, that chest, when you said like my chest kind of caves in, it's like, what would your chest say if it could say something? What is it communicating? And we kind of go down that thread to find more like limiting beliefs. So I'm not looking at bodies as much. I'm looking at bodies communicating, but communicating thought patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So then we find the thought pattern, and it's like, well, how do we start to soften it and question it and find different perspectives?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a place where my work does that too, where we kind of see that thought pattern, and I'm more kind of often connecting with it from a like process within the bodied experience, where the person will kind of, we might identify that that's that pattern that brings in that body communication, and then we hang out with that body communication. Because the way I kind of see it is our bodies are asking us to pay attention if they're communicating. And it is typical for us as humans, especially with the story that, oh, there's pain, there's something wrong. I need to separate from that, right? And like, yeah, it can feel hard to like lean in and sense into pain because it's uncomfortable. And we tend to really avoid discomfort in our culture here. And so I'm kind of offering that shift of, hey body, okay, you're communicating for a reason. And just like communicating, like a human communicating, or I often share offer the kind of metaphor of like a toddler or a pet, where they don't have words. So their communication of, hey, I need something, is going to be in the way it's going to be, which is not with words. And so our bodies are similar. They don't have words. Usually, like you may be able to connect in and then get the thought pattern, right? Then there's words. And often there's also this like sense, and sometimes there's a color to that sense, and sometimes there's a movement pattern. Like I find the movement of it really interesting because that really can reflect our body's movement and function. Is if something's scary and we move away from it, like we tense that part, so that shifts the mobility of that space and shifts our body's ability to bring nutrients and nourishment into that space, and for our body to actually offer that healing that our bodies naturally can. And so I know I'm kind of digressing into my approach again, but I think that's the space of the curiosity I have around the somatics piece, is from a money standpoint, is like that recognition, for inviting that recognition for people of, oh, I'm feeling this tension. Okay, asking that space is one option, and that's hard to do if you're not held in a held container sometimes, or you're not practiced with it. But we can practice, and it gets easier, and we can find somatic practitioners, and like making that connection, as like you touched on earlier, like, oh, as when I'm in this space of feeling like finances are more scarce, or whatever is the person's experience, oh, then I start to feel that there, right? And it sounds like in sessions with you, at least, that people are getting to like visit that, right? Like maybe like you're not going deep into that somatic processing place of it, but more that there's that pattern, and like, oh, maybe that pattern, do you notice that maybe that pattern could come up consistently? Oh, that's useful and interesting and helpful in the space of, oh, is there something wrong with me that comes up, where people then go to a medical provider? And I'm not trying to keep people from medical providers. I'm just trying to say, like, and our bodies communicate for reasons.
Yeah, I'm hearing you just lead with a lot of curiosity. Like
Yeah,
curiosity above all else of like what is happening, what is being communicated. Thank you.
yeah. Like, how do you, if you recognize as a highly sensitive body that is maybe chatty or loud, depending on how you see it, how do we, like, then what?
Mhm.
And I think for me, it's like there's different avenues, right? There's books about somatics, and there's like my anatomy offering, which is not one-on-one. And then there's many somatic and embodiment practitioners out there. Um, and it can be like, while this is something that one can do for ourselves, because you have a body, you can practice sensing into your body, that it can be really helpful to be held in that, especially if it's hard if it's hard to be in your body because your body's chatty, so it's easier to be outside, or because of life experiences that made that where it was safer to not be in your body. And so that's true. And then coming into body can be hard and scary. And so sometimes not to like scare people from doing it away from doing it on their own, but to like give permission that if as you try, it may feel hard, and that's okay. And you don't have to push. You don't like. My intention of curiosity is definitely is to meant to be not a space of like oppressive pushing, and instead say, oh, okay, I see that. Okay, maybe today in this moment is not the place to go to that part of my body, or to try to be fully embodied. Maybe I can find one spot on my body, right? And maybe it's not the space when you're that's feeling scary from a financial standpoint, or from whatever triggering around you standpoint, but be like, is there a spot that feels like I can just connect today, that does feel whole or well? And it may be really teeny, and that's okay. But it can be a space to start where you can find the spot. Um, I had one person find that on their lower leg, and it was great because it was a place they could go back to. And then over time, that space grew, and they were able to say, "Wow, that's a space of wellness," or quiet for a chatty body. So maybe that's like, what's part of me's quiet right now? Because all parts of our body want to be seen and held. And sometimes the quieter spaces, just like sometimes the quieter people, don't get seen or supported. And so taking a pause to say, hey, quiet part, can I just see you today? Can be, I've seen it be really, actually, really lovely and nourishing for the chattier bodies.
Yeah, coming to see a place of maybe safety and settledness in your body. Yeah.
Yeah, and what word works for you might be different. Like I have one person that softness is the word. And another person was, I think, quiet or wholeness, and another person wellness. So it's kind of just like, depends on what word is accessible for you too.
Okay. And I want to touch back. It's kind of coming all over the place, but as you were talking about your chest feeling, the feeling of shame, I see that a lot with clients, especially when I'm working with clients who have access to more financial flexibility, financial privilege. And one of the interpretations that a client offered or that a client got to was seeing how it's more of a like systemic pain of wishing everyone had this. Right? So that's what they ended up recognizing was the need behind it. Like this feeling of aching for them was, I ache for the entire world, which is the hard part sometimes of being highly sensitive, our interconnectedness, the deepness of feeling, but it has so many benefits too of, again, going back to the conversation I had earlier with someone a few months ago about like my body communicating so much to me before things were really out of whack, right? Before I had IBS or something like that. Like, nope, my body was talking to me way before that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there is a gift to that, and especially if you don't feel like you have or don't have the space to shift things, then it can feel hard to have that loudness and chattiness and sensitivity. And I do think it is a gift that allows me in my body to be able to better support people and hold space. And I think that's what I see from those I support, who are like coming into their relationship with their sensitivity, whether it's becoming aware of what that means or being able to label that as highly sensitive if that feels like a helpful tool for them. And yeah, I like that frame and experience and that you shared about that other client, or that client of yours, because I think there's a truth for that in that ache, and in a way like a desire to like help everyone, right? And like, and there's the truth of, but I also need to make sure that I'm helping myself and taking care of me in it too. And how do we like find the balance of taking care of others and ourselves simultaneously, which I find difficult personally. And I also know that part of my shame is space response is a fear of judgment, which is a different dynamic than the kind of aching for the world. It's a different story, and it's one that I am working on.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing where you're at personally in your money story, for sharing with us your story of like being in the medical profession as you're finding your place, as you're coming to the right place where you can provide service, provide healing in the way that feels most aligned to you and to what you hear your clients need. I really appreciate your time, and I'll make sure to link on the podcast how people can get in touch with your online embodied anatomy class. Yeah, thank you so much for being here, Kaeri.
Thank you. It was really a pleasure.
Kaeri reminds us that symptoms aren't failures or flaws. They're messages, invitations to slow down and listen more deeply. Her approach to medicine feels like a return to relationship between doctor and patient, body and mind, self and system. It asks us to bring curiosity instead of control, compassion instead of compliance. And it mirrors the same truth we explore so often on this podcast, that healing, like money, is relational work. It was such a pleasure having Dr. Kaeri Schaefer join us today and share her wisdom about practicing from the understory, where healing begins with presence, safety, and trust. I hope this conversation invites you to listen more closely to your body and the messages it's sharing. Thank you for joining me on Highly Sensitive Money. I'm Diana Giselle Yanez, and I hope this episode helped you see how money and sensitivity can work together while honoring our interconnected well-being. We have the power to create a system where everyone's needs are met because nature is abundant. If you found value in today's conversation, please take a moment to leave a review and share this episode with someone who could benefit. Your support helps this message reach more people navigating their own financial journeys. A thank you goes to Mike Schul for the music and Juan Antonio Nunez for producing. For more resources on bringing money and social justice together, sign up for my monthly newsletter over at allthecolors.net. I also invite you to schedule a free 30-minute call where we can talk about money coaching, investment management, and all things money and social justice. Until next time, remember that your sensitivity and deep thinking is your superpower.